The sun had barely risen when Elijah felt a strange chill pass through his home. It wasn't the morning breeze, this was something unseen, something felt, a weight, almost spiritual, had taken its place in the corners of his walls. He stood in his living room, coffee in hand, staring at the clock. 6:06 a.m. The time seemed to echo in his head. A few nights earlier, the wind had shifted unnaturally, the kind of wind that doesn't shake trees, but souls. Since then, he had been waking up at odd hours, hearing faint whispers not of this world, but of another. His instincts told him something was coming. His spirit was on edge. Across realms unseen, Archangel Michael stood in the courts of heaven, sword drawn, face solemn, speaking Elijah's name before the throne of God, not in fear, but in justice. Because what was coming for Elijah wasn't karma, it was conspiracy. The call had already been placed. An anonymous tip, crafted by Envy, filtered through bureaucratic channels, a package Elijah never ordered, a conversation twisted beyond its meaning. His name was placed on a list it never belonged to. It wasn't the Crimea, it was the illusion of one, and it was spreading like wildfire. Michael whispered, "Stay still." What they mean for harm, heaven will use for glory. What Elijah didn't know yet was that someone closer, someone he once helped, was now the reason behind the false case building against him. Not because of money, but because of visibility. Elijah had recently been praised in a room full of influential people. His ideas, his humility, his rise. It triggered someone's shadow. But darkness doesn't move alone. A small group of 3 to be exact were working behind the scenes. One forged documents. One spied. One remained quiet, riddled with guilt. The quiet one was cracking. Heaven had already whispered in their dreams. As the officers neared Elijah's home, they were unaware of the spiritual marking above his doorway. Last night, as he slept, Archangel Michael marked it with holy fire. It would confuse the accusers, stall their tongues, delay their mission. The knock came at 7:14 a.m. Heavy, measured, not casual. Elijah opened the door. Calm, ready, but not because he understood it was because his soul had already aligned. "You're under arrest for suspicion of cyber fraud and receiving unauthorized government payments," one officer said. He didn't flinch. "I understand," Elijah replied, hands raised peacefully. But just as they turned him, another officer new to the force paused. He had seen Elijah's face in a dream 2 nights ago. In that dream, a child's voice had said, "He's innocent. He's protected." "Wait," the officer murmured, "something's off." Still, the arrest went through. But as they processed Elijah at the station, a system alert lit up on the main computer. "Do not finalize evidence under review." Michael had moved. A flash drive had just been discovered at another address left anonymously. It contained logs, recordings, even a confession. A digital trail that led not to Elijah but to his accuser. Meanwhile, inside the holding room, Elijah prayed. Not with words, but with stillness. He knew something was happening outside his comprehension. A woman highly placed, deeply spiritual called the precinct. Her daughter had seen Elijah in a vision. "I don't know why," she said, "but he's not who you think he is." The officers hesitated. One stepped out. One stayed behind. "Elijah," he said, "what did you do last March on the 12th? "I helped a man get his sister medical aid," Elijah answered. "That man? He works with the ministry now. He vouched for you an hour ago." Silence followed, a long pause. Then, the decision. Release him pending investigation. The real culprits panicked. One tried to flee. One tried to delete files. The quiet one broke down. "Send a message. It was never his fault. I tried to stop it. They wouldn't let me." The media didn't pick up the story immediately, but heaven did, and the ripple began. Elijah went home that evening, and not in shame, but in clarity. Michael stood in his room again that night, this time smiling. "You didn't fall. You were forged." This was the divine reversal. Over the next weeks, the truth unraveled like prophecy. The forged signature was debunked by handwriting experts. The icon impersonation was traced back to a foreign IP. The mysterious package, contaminated with planted evidence, exposed. By the end of the month, Elijah's name was not only cleared up, it became sacred. He was invited to speak, write, and lead panels on digital justice. But more importantly, he became a voice for the falsely accused. One podcast became a global hit, framed by man, freed by heaven. When asked what saved him, he simply said, stillness and Michael. But behind the scenes, heaven was still moving. The network that framed him, dismantled, investigated, prosecuted, and the woman who initiated it all, she was exposed, and not out of revenge, but revelation. Her motive, not greed, but jealousy of Elijah's light. When I saw people listening to you, she would later confess in court, I couldn't stand it. I thought if I can't rise, he shouldn't either. Michael's final message to Elijah came in a dream. You were never on trial. The lie was. And now, the truth reigns. You are not just free. You are chosen. Walk in that. Part 2. Rise of the Marked. The weeks following Elijah's release were surreal. Strangers approached him on the street, some in awe, some in confusion. A quiet rumor had spread something divine had happened in that precinct. No one could quite explain it, but those who were there knew. They'd seen eyes flicker, hands tremble, and systems stall. Elijah kept to himself at first. His home became a sanctuary of stillness. But heaven wasn't done. Michael whispered in the silence, now rise. It's time. An anonymous donor sent Elijah a secure laptop preloaded with encrypted data, testimonies, and witness reports. It was clear, others had been framed too. Elijah's case had become a doorway. Through it, a hidden room of false accusations and systemic abuse was being unveiled. A well-known activist reached out. She had seen Elijah's story online and felt led to meet him. When they did, she wept. You're the one from my dreams 6 months ago. The one in fire but not burned. Together, they formed Project Reversal, a non-profit aimed at legally and spiritually protecting the innocent. Lawyers volunteered. Whistleblowers stepped forward. Journalists, at first skeptical, began to investigate. Meanwhile, the woman who tried to destroy Elijah, her life had crumbled under the weight of her secrets. The people she conspired with turned on her. Files surfaced, names were revealed. But Elijah never sought vengeance. Instead, he prayed for her healing. One afternoon, Elijah sat in a courtroom, and not as a defendant, but as a guest speaker. He spoke on justice, redemption, and spiritual warfare. He quoted ancient texts, not for religion, but for revelation. Your name is not what they say it is, he told the crowd. It's what heaven has declared. Archangel Michael watched, silent, proud. In the years that followed, Elijah's name became a symbol. A child born to one of his supporters was named Elijah. A documentary was made. A book published. A network of protection was built for the next generation of the falsely accused. And through it all, Elijah stayed humble. He remembered the knock, the stillness, the voice. Michael's final blessing: you rose through accusation, now rise through legacy.